everyone. Welcome back to the Building Bigger Lives podcast. I'm Michael Regan, along with my co-host and today's featured guest, Kathryn Peterson. Kathryn, welcome back to the show.
Thanks. It's always good to reconnect and uncover another fun topic.
It is. And I think what I've really enjoyed as we've gone through, now a couple of dozen of these recordings over the last 6 months is sometimes they tend to be broader topics, or sometimes we've had some interviews with folks where we've covered a long period of time or a large number of high level things. And then other times we get to dive in and get really tactical. And some of those episodes have been fun. I get a lot of feedback from clients and friends who listen to those. And so today is one where we're going to get a little bit of both. And if you don't mind, I think I'll feature an event we both recently attended back in the city of Las Vegas. And we were at an event that has existed for many years, currently branded the Mastermind Summit. And that event has over the years evolved from something that was, a very high intensity, high energy sales summit to something that I think today is a nice balance of still very tactical sales things, but also a lot of strategy, a lot of opportunity for us to hear from a diverse audience of presenters. Some of them are producers themselves, others are executives within some of these companies. So it's a nice mix of people. For those of you listening, largely focused on the housing industry. So the folks that are featured are in that. So I hope if you're listening today and that's not your marketplace, that you'll at least listen and look for some of the opportunities that you could glean from some of Kathryn's takeaways, because I think you'll find some that apply to many different industries. So without further ado, I'd love to at least get a high level view first, and then let's dive in. What attracted you to sign up for this one, and what were you looking forward to most before you arrived?
Oh, two good questions. I've been to this event a lot, and it's always had nuggets that I take away. But this event, really what drew me to it is the people that were attending. So I kind of do a little check-in to see who's going to be there. And there was going to be a lot of speakers that I wanted to hear and a bunch of the industry, let's call them friends that I have. And I wanted to see them and be able to connect with those people. So that's what I was most excited about.
That's great. Yeah. And having spent time with you at several events over the years, you really do. That's a great way to describe what you were looking forward to. You really have built a lot of relationships that sometimes are just friends. They're not people that you're literally doing business with or strategically trying to align with. You just have really developed some great relationships, and it's fun to see you in an environment like that. Okay, so we arrived at this event, and from the best of my memory, this thing went from a Wednesday through a Friday. And,
Mhm.
Arriving on Wednesday, there were some, interesting opportunities to kick off. I think an executive panel was one of the first things that they featured. And then they rolled into several presenters from the stage. Just tell me from your memory of that first day, what were some of the highlights in your mind? And did you take any notes from either a presenter or some of the content that you were inspired by?
Yeah, so during the executive kind of group that was together, it was over a lunch, and there were a couple of quotes I pulled out. And one was, "We take care of the problems that people didn't know existed." And I think that made me think about the real estate agents that we work with. And it also made me think about our job and how many little details we take care of behind the scenes that people don't know exist. And I think I wrote those down because they were important for me to think about later for both myself and my real estate partners, because I think that's an important thing that we don't always bring up to our clients as much. We just take care of the problem before they may never even know that there was a problem, but we've solved it before it's even hit them. And how are we structuring that with a client? So it just made me think a little bit about our jobs a little differently. So that's why I wrote down that quote specifically from that.
Yeah, I love that you grabbed that. So here's my feedback, just hearing you describe what impacted you is I think sometimes when we're in a production role, we've got folks in the chain of command that are in fact playing above us in terms of their responsibilities. We don't always know what they do, and we're not
Mhm.
always sure if it's that valuable. And so our assumption is sometimes, why do I need this person? What are we
Mhm.
paying for here? I mean, I don't know if that ever goes through your mind, but it certainly does with some of my clients. And I would encourage any of you out there watching or listening today, assume positive intent. Assume that this person is not just a placeholder in a role. And maybe what you don't know is all the things they're taking care of that just never even hit your radar because they
Mhm.
took care of them. So that's a
Mhm.
really great way to look at that. And I love that you were inspired to bring that one home. That's great.
Yeah, the other one that I loved was currency is in the confidence of the originator.
Ooh, tell me about that.
So, kind of what they were talking about is who they think is going to succeed in this market. And that confidence is so important to have in both real estate and mortgage that that originator's confidence changes everything as far as their business. And I loved that because I think, that's something that's been really important for me to instill in my girls, but also I think that that has given me an advantage is because that is a piece of feedback that I've gotten, but haven't always taken in of I am confident or you speak with confidence, and I think that is so important in what we do, and I'm gonna jump ahead, but Shayla said, "Are you a leader or a helper?" That's what her talk was, Shayla Gifford. And it kind of ties in, that's why I'm looping this back around, because I think if you approach things as a leader, it is with that extra confidence that's really making a difference right now, because what people don't want is someone who's like, "Well, I don't know, like, I don't know which loan product you should do." Like, that kind of, um, uncertainty is especially dangerous right now in our industry.
Yeah, that's really good because when you get to a word like confidence, a common question I get is that just a natural characteristic for an individual, or can that be developed over time? Newsflash for those of you out there listening, it can be developed over time. And one of the
Yep.
things that really helps accelerate that. So I love that the mind that you had went straight to with my girls. I think when we are young, so those of you out there who are parenting the next generation of professionals, one of the seeds you can plant in their heart early on is to start speaking words of confidence into them, reminding them of little small things you see them doing that boost their confidence. So rather than always finding something to critique, from time to time, find something that you can really affirm and use words that plant those seeds in their hearts, because at some point those grow, and at some point when they bloom, you've got another generation of confidence out there. So, Kathryn, you talked about confidence, and confidence is such an important topic right now because, even though some examples I may have given around parenting could apply when we're looking at the future of leadership, the fact is some of our friends out listening right now are well into their careers and suddenly they've been derailed. They've maybe lost their confidence. What advice would you give to a person who's currently in a high performance sales role who's just not feeling very confident after 2 really tough years in this marketplace?
So I think getting an outside perspective can be really helpful. And I did a exercise. I think I brought this up in here where I called a few clients and said, "Hey, why do you use me? What do you like about me?" And that actually did help because we're not like I'm not going to tell myself, "Oh my gosh, I'm so smart." Like that's a hard thing to just tell yourself, but to have someone else give that to you, sometimes you're like, "Oh yeah, I kind of do know what I'm doing. I did a good job." And just taking in the compliment and saying, "Okay, yes," instead of immediately saying, "Oh, yeah, well, that's because everybody else did all the work," or whatever. "Great,
Yeah.
thank you for that feedback. Let me ask a follow-up question. Why do you think I'm this way? Or what about me gives you this? Or what about what I do every day?" And so you can dig into it even more, and some of those things can just help give you that little boost. But I think also trusting yourself and forgiving yourself are the 2 other pieces of confidence I think are important of, "Oh, I should have done that differently." It's like, "You know what? I was in the moment, I did the best I could with what I had and move on." Now that is easier said than done, but nothing erodes confidence like thinking through something we should have done differently over and over again in our mind.
Yeah, you're touching on a hot button for me because I get so discouraged when I hear people shooting all over themselves. And I know where that comes from.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's just a habit they've developed. Sometimes it comes from a little bit worse, either a parent or a manager who has just driven that type of attitude into their heads. And now they just walk on eggshells. Oh, I should have done this. I should have done that.
Mhm.
And now they're constantly second guessing their effort. And I love the way that you flipped it over because, again, having a growth mindset, this is more natural for you. So if you're listening out there, what Kathryn did is she just flipped it over and said, okay, but I could have done that differently. Not I should have, could have done that differently. But what did I learn from that? What did I learn that might help me be better as I move forward? And that would be a real takeaway as well. Even if we didn't grab that straight from the Mastermind Summit, that's just a great takeaway of one of your notes from that event. And I'm glad you talked a little bit about confidence. Here's a segue then. So, I think it was maybe Tim who talked about this idea of if you had a magic wand, you might be able to change something in your business today. What would it be? We don't have to swing a wand here. I think this is a great time of year to really evaluate some things that you might keep doing, improve upon, start doing, or stop doing.
Mhm.
Where did that hit you? And what would be some examples of that that you might have grabbed and taken home yourself?
Yeah, so there's a few things that we are doing that we've just done that way forever. And maybe it's time to reevaluate some of those things and say, okay, what's something I can do to add some technology into this to make it easier for the client or our
Mm,
team? And what does that look like? So that's something I've thought about. Both Phil Jones, he also brought it up of you may be doing business like you did 2 years ago, and that's now obsolete. So
mm,
some things about that I've thought through, but I think it's also an important question, that exact question to ask our referral partners as well. Of if you had a magic wand and could change one thing about your business, what would that be? So mine is some efficiencies and, but for the real estate partner, that's where you can come in and say, okay, great. Well, I'm not keeping track of open house attendees, or I need to market better to my past clients, or my database is kind of a mess and I don't know what to do. So I think that's a powerful question to ask, which is another reason why I wrote down that question.
Okay, so if it forces you, when you hear that question, to pause and really evaluate, let's take that a step further. Let's talk a little bit about something tactical someone could do this summer. So, if this was your mid-year review, I mean, we're
Mhm.
recording this here in June of 2024, but the listener might be grabbing this, a few weeks later, or maybe even, a little bit down the road. Um, there's no magic just because the calendar says it's, the end of the month or the end of the quarter to being the evaluation period. I mean, certainly as you go forward, those are convenient times to
Mhm.
schedule when you're looking
Mhm.
forward. But if today, as you're listening to this, let's go back to your examples. What what technical steps would you encourage someone to take if it was time to do that evaluation? Let's say that's you listening. What exactly would you do to evaluate the things that might either need to be improved or might need to be paused altogether or to create the space to try something new? How would you actually sit down and do that if that was your job today?
Ooh. I think for me, there's this little nagging feeling in my brain sometimes of like, this kind of feels inefficient, or this feels like there's a better way, or you see a better way.
Mm,
And it's grabbing that when you see it and saying, huh, what if I looked at this differently? Can you, another originator, send me what you're doing for this so that I can look at it and compare it side by side and see, hey, are there some things that I could, you know, steal and modify a little bit and not steal because I have permission, but that can just do that. So you kind of get these things of what are the things that we're doing over and over again in our business, and let's reevaluate how that looks from the client perspective, how that looks from our perspective, and the efficiency perspective, and kind of get those to roll together. So I think it's just evaluating those things every so often in your own time.
yeah, I like that you're looking at it through the lens of just the experience that you would feel and how to do that because I think our listeners all can relate to that. It's not Don't make this process so technical that it's difficult. Make it easy. Just, sometimes a piece of paper and a pen or a whiteboard are all you need, a place to get some of these thoughts out of your head and start evaluating them. There are many exercises we can take people through. One of the things that I love doing is an Eisenhower matrix. Once we've got a lot of ideas out there, we have to sort them. And I tell people all the time that matrix won't solve anything, but it'll help you sort everything. And once you've sorted it between four different categories, things that are important to you that are urgent, separated from things that are also important but not as urgent, things that might have some degree of not important to you, but someone else has decided they're urgent, from things that clearly aren't that important or urgent altogether. That tool up on a whiteboard with all the fresh thinking that you're putting out there might be a great way to see things differently, try something differently, and really make the small adjustments that could have a huge impact back to your confidence. That's really what, I think matters most. Often we get caught up in, oh, I want to see exactly how Kathryn does it. And the truth is, maybe Kathryn just does it that way because it's natural to her and it's the way her mind thinks, so she does it. The truth is, it's maybe not the magic of exactly how she does it. It might be the confidence that she has because she's chosen to do it that way. So that's a great tie down on that. Okay, so let's look at some of the other speakers that presented. One of the
Mhm.
guys that grabbed my attention simply because he is currently the number one producing loan originator in the United States of America, and that title alone should cause most of us to say, "Well, I'd like to at least hear from this gentleman. What is he doing? Why is it working? And is there anything there you could grab?" What did you think when you heard Shant speak? Was he someone that you were able to connect with and take some notes from?
Yeah, so there's a few things I liked about him. One was he was like, there's no magic formula. I just like I don't know really why I'm speaking, or he didn't say it quite like that, but he's like, there's nothing magical I'm gonna give you. It's just that here's a few little bits, but there was what he was really saying was I just work and I just have relentless focus was one of his words, which I
Mhm.
wrote that down because that was huge. And then mastering the mundane. So it's not that he's picked up this fancy tool or he's done this or that. He's just staying in touch with people and he's mastering the mundane with relentless focus.
Yeah, that's you grabbed some really good ones, and I agree. I was surprised when he took the stage at how not arrogant his approach was. It was very
Yeah.
disarming.
Yeah.
In fact, I think he got up there with a ball cap on, and my first reaction honestly was, "Oh, come on. Why are we doing that?" And within seconds, I forgot all about what he looked like because he was so approachable. His style was very easy to connect with, and I think you are right. He did not take some attitude of, "Oh,
Mhm.
I'm weaving magic." It was very, almost the Wizard of Oz. He did the opposite and said, "There really is no man standing behind the curtain." There's nothing magical. You know who it reminded me of a lot is years ago, my friend Todd Bookspan took a stage at a sales mastery event, and his presentation was on some like, this unlocking the secrets to being $100 million producer. And Todd got up there, and the first thing he said was, "Just so you know, I'm not going to impress you with any secrets. You're going to have to be impressed by very mundane things." I mean, it was very similar in the topic. So, Todd, if you're out there listening, you were missed at the Mastermind Summit, and you're still making an impact on top producers today with a comment like that.
Yeah.
So great takeaways on his, Kathryn, because I do think many of us think there's got to be some sort of formula here, some sort of shiny object I can grab a hold of. And Shant really said, "Yeah, here's the shiny object. I roll up my sleeves every day at 4:30 a.m. and I get to work." And
Mhm.
that was refreshing, without a doubt,
Mhm.
without a doubt. Okay, let's pivot.
Yeah.
Or did you have
Yeah.
another thought on Shant?
Nope. Nope. That's
Okay,
it.
let's pivot. And speaking of our friend Todd Bookspan, another friend of ours, Ken Perry, was in the room, and we've interviewed both of these gentlemen here on the podcast in the past. So feel free to scroll back through a prior episode if that's of value to you. But Ken is the founder and the president of a company called Knowledge Coop. And before we get into some of the fun things that Ken was able to present on that I certainly enjoyed personally, I think he did a great job of setting up a topic that most of our audience is interested in, and that is how do we approach AI in the
Mhm.
housing industry? What should we be doing with it? What shouldn't we be doing with it? Oh, no, I violated my own comment. Those are should comments. What could we be doing with it? And where would it maybe not be as helpful? Give me some of your takeaways from Ken's presentation.
So one thing I like about Ken is he's positive in most of things in his outlook of almost anything. And he's really said he's really good at embracing technology, and he's been able to use it for all sorts of crazy things like, hey, I have to go to the grocery store. Where might this be located in the grocery store? Chat GPT, who I think during the presentation named her something, and he's now completely replaced Google with, AI essentially, Chat GPT. So he almost has a whole different view on it, on what it can be used for, and he's kind of always testing those guidelines. While I was chatting with him, just at his booth, he there was a question we had about an actress or music or something. I can't remember what it was. He texted his kid, who he was like, oh, he's gonna know this right off the top of his head, and also asked his friend on his phone, AI, quickly. AI came up with it faster, and it was a little bit of an obscure thing. And it was correct. So, and then his kid texted back a few minutes later. So he was like, there you go. That's he kind of in his mind is always playing these little games to test things, but there's so much application in our own world that we can do to save time. And I think that's huge. Is let's look at it as an assistant that can help us save time in our business. And even if you're testing it and playing with it, it's going to be helpful. Whether you're a podcaster, an originator, stay-at-home parent, I think it is going to be helpful. And at this point, you can refuse to use it, but you're already using it every day and you don't know that you are. So I think that it was good just to hear some of that from him, and hear what he's using it for.
Yeah, you're right about that. Ken does take a playful approach to this topic because he pretty much lives life that way. He is a very playful person, and I think that's one of those things that our culture has really hammered out of our soul by the time we get to high school, and most people just don't carry a playful attitude forward. Ken has somehow reconnected with his, if he ever lost it along the way, or maybe he never did. But he really is refreshing in that respect because what he's doing is he's taking this very playful approach and now allowing himself to be constantly curious. Oh, I wonder what would happen if I tried this. I wonder what would happen. Hey, what does this button do? And I think when you see Ken as a professional, as a leader of an organization that is probably the leading um, resource in our industry for compliance training and all sorts of now other types of sales training. They even launched a product on AI that allows you to search
Mhm.
guidelines, and it's a completely um, beautiful way for an originator to be able to get to the heart of a product that they want to feature without the fear of, well, what if you can't do this, or what if there's going to be a problem? They, as an organization, have embraced Ken's style, and now Knowledge Coop is really creatively innovating and evolving as an organization. So it'll be fun to see what that company becomes in the future. Bottom line, with those takeaways you had from Ken, is I hope our audience, if you're curious at all about where AI might play a role in your real estate business, your mortgage lending business, or again, even if you're outside of the housing industry and you're listening, I would encourage you to download an AI tool. There are plenty of them available to you. You mentioned ChatGPT. That's currently, I think, the most accessible open source product that's out there, and start doing some of what you described Ken doing so that you can get comfortable with the idea on things that maybe in your mind don't matter that much. They're easy places to
Mhm.
practice it and play with it. But once you've done that, give yourself an opportunity to realize that it could be a massive time saver for you when you start looking at very tactical things you do. Searching guidelines is one of those. I think crafting really great emails is another one of those. I think putting out really great content into your social sphere or marketing plan is one of those, and on and on. There's a lot of ways that if you'll use it, it can do the bulk of the background work for you. And then you just get to play copy editor. It's going to give you maybe 80 to 90% of really quality content. And then for the 10 to 20 that you're not comfortable with, modify it, edit it, make it sound like you. Imagine how much time that will save a person who might spend, an hour at their keyboard crafting some piece of content that they need to get out, and AI can produce that in milliseconds, and now you're really accelerating through your day so much more
Mhm.
smoothly. So glad you picked that one up. Any others, Kathryn? I know we could talk about every single speaker, but maybe any others that in your mind impacted you, gave you a take home that we should share with our audience?
Yeah, Phil Jones was amazing. He's the author of Exactly What to Say. And the room went silent because they were so engaged in what he said. So you could hear a pin drop in there. And it was um, it was a very interesting concept. It basically was talking about the small difference in words can make such a big difference. And there was a few little pieces I picked up on that I thought I would bring up. One was success is in direct correlation to the questions you ask. And I loved that because I feel I look back on pieces and parts of my life, and it ended up that it was the questions that were asked in those moments that changed the direction. And I love that line. I was like, oh, this is so good.
It's so much
So,
more eloquent than the one that I use, which is Kathryn. If you want better answers, ask better questions. Mine sounds a little rough around the edges. He's much smoother, so he does know exactly what to say.
yes. And he has a British accent, which helps everything. So, because it sounds eloquent, even he could probably say anything, it would sound eloquent.
Okay, I'm interrupting you again. Fun fact: my AI has a
Oh.
female British accent because I love how fussy she sounds, and it's beautiful. So you're right. Go for the British accent. That's a great call.
Absolutely. And then another piece was in with rejection, they're not saying no to us. They're saying not now, maybe not this product. And I just thought that was a good piece to bring up to our listeners because I think we get turned down so much in our life, but also in the industry. And I think it's a good way to look at rejection. And that I was like, oh, I need to write that one down.
That's powerful. In fact, I want to unpack that a little further because as a former originator myself, and for many of you out there who are in sales related positions, it is tempting when someone declines the opportunity to work with you to take that so personally that it
Mhm.
now, fractures a relationship, or maybe
Mhm.
even to some degree, if you're a little bit more sensitive, you feel like, well, then forget you. I'm not even going to call you anymore. If you don't want to
Mhm.
work with me, I don't even want to talk to you. And the truth is, it might not be that deeply rooted at all. That's a construct we build up in our own heads. The truth is just what you said about Phil M. Jones is maybe that just wasn't the right opportunity in that moment. And saying no to that opportunity didn't mean we can never do something in the future together. It
Mhm.
just meant not now. I love that takeaway. And I hope most of our audience is paying attention to that because that's very real. Many of our sales professionals out there have to figure that out because if you're going to be personally hurt every time someone says no, your world is going to get smaller faster.
Mhm. I loved that. The other one that I thought that was really important in this time in our industry is fear is the fertilizer of growth. If you're not scared, you're not growing. And those weren't said necessarily together, but I put them together because I think it's important that we realize it's okay to be a little scared because that can propel what we do. Oh my gosh. I might not have any business. What do I need to do to change things up? So we have to look at fear a little differently.
Yeah, well said. And I think we live in a culture today where many people, not everyone certainly, but many people live in such abundance, especially here in the United States of America, where we don't tend to be afraid anymore of, oh no, what if I don't have any money? What if I don't have any food? And look, I realize that that could come across to someone listening as well. Little do you know, that's a very real fear, but it's a fear that I think many people have worked hard to try to get away from, and they maybe forget the fact that it's actually a very human nature and very important fear to embrace, one that has for thousands of years driven, human society to innovate and develop and to conquer. So, rather than being afraid of that, it's harnessing it. So for you personally, as you take that thought forward, how do you use that in a way that is positive, that it doesn't, because fear is a delicate thing, fight, flight,
Mhm.
or freeze. How do you use it in a way that leads to positive outcomes rather than negative outcomes?
Oh, that's a good question. Talk about the questions of success. There you go.
I get paid to ask questions, so I do understand.
You should be good at it by now, right? So I think it's when you recognize that you are feeling fear, turn it around and say, okay, because of that fear, what's my action step? So what should I do? Because I'm afraid of this. Let's say you're afraid of losing all your business. Okay, great. What can I do to keep the business? Okay, well, if I do this, this, and this, it's going to mean that I keep my clients and I keep my business and
Mm.
I keep. So I think it's creating the action list and recognizing the fear and what it is. And sometimes you may have to kind of think about it and say, okay, what am I really afraid of here? Am I afraid of losing this specific client, or am I worried that I'm losing all my clients? And how do I really break that down and say, okay, why am I so nervous about this? Okay, good. Well, it's because I don't have this part of the process lined out. Okay, what do I need to do with that so that I am confident? We're back to that again in my process, so I don't have to be worried about this anymore.
Well, I'd love to tie this particular topic down with an area of confidence that I want to highlight from the host of this year's Mastermind Summit. So most of you well, maybe not most of you, some of you may be familiar with Matt Emery. Matt Emery is the owner and host of this particular event, and something I think he did with confidence that turned out to be very smart. He put Phil M. Jones, his keynote speaker, as the very last speaker on the very
Mhm,
last day. What an interesting flip of the script that was, because often what you experience at events like this is by the last day, people have started trickling out. They're starting to catch their flights to go home. They're maybe feeling information overloaded and they just, go have some quiet time or whatever they're going to do. He managed to get that room filled up one more time right up to the closing bell. And
mhm.
so, Matt, your confidence was noted, and putting Phil in that spot was appreciated. Clearly, we took a few things away from that, many more that we could talk about. But Kathryn, I just want to thank you for spending some time unpacking some of your highlight notes. And if in those notes there are some nuggets that we should dig deeper into, let's make some future episodes out of those, because I think our
Mhm.
audience would certainly be interested in that. And I hope if you're listening today that you appreciated the way we approached this. This really wasn't like a promotion for the Mastermind Summit. It was really our takeaways and impressions that grabbed us. But Matt, I can assure you it was great, and we'll look forward to being back in 2025. Kathryn, any closing thoughts or takeaways for our audience before we wrap up today?
No, I think that if anything, it's really thinking through the little nuggets that you get from people and how that can apply in your business. And I have my to-do list that's more tactical, but these were kind of the little gems and quotes that I heard throughout that I wanted to make sure we were passing on to others. And I think that that's why it's so important to take notes, is because I
Mhm.
would have forgotten all of these if I hadn't done that. And some of these I'm really going to think on, and I hope that our listeners will be able to do the same thing. And thanks, Michael. It's always great to be here with you.
Well, I love it too, and I'll look forward to future events together, future episodes together. And for those of you listening today, thanks for tuning in to the Building Bigger Lives podcast. We're, of course, available here on Apple, on their iTunes and podcast platform. But don't forget, we're also available on YouTube. And for those of you that prefer a video version of this, because you just love to see Kathryn and I on the screen, we're available on YouTube as well. Look us up at Building Bigger Lives. We'll look forward to seeing you on an episode soon. Hope everyone has a great day.